think we want to be very thankful of the support that one of us has gotten over the past couple of weeks, and we have a big update to give you. Lucas, go ahead.
The nightmare's over, folks. WestJet, it's been a hard, 17 days?
17 days.
Or wait, my math's a little bit off. What is it, the 28th? I got back on Yeah, okay, my math's way off. See, I can't even do math right. I've been so anguished with grief, Will. Sorry, it's closer to, I don't know. It's the 28th now. We're recording this, and it got lost on the 13th. But yes, not to make you wait any longer, folks. My luggage is safe and sound. WestJet returned my luggage.
Yay.
So, but the war is not over, Will. That's just the battle. Now I have to get reimbursed for the $300 they owe me for, the things I had to buy that I couldn't wait to replace while I was waiting for my luggage. They do have a reimbursement program, but knowing WestJet, we'll see how long that takes. I waited on hold for 3 hours today to ensure that my receipts had been received, because their form you got to sign for the reimbursement, there's a little spot for you to add your receipts, okay? And I took pictures of all my receipts, but they were all 3 megabytes, and the minimum picture size, or the maximum picture size, rather, was 2 megabytes, okay?
Oh, come on.
I had to run the receipts through a, image compression tool, and the whole time I was thinking, man, if I can barely do this, imagine Grandpa can't find...
Yeah, seriously.
Can't do his WestJet form. Anyway, I figured out you could email it to them. And after emailing all my receipts and staying on hold for 3 hours, it's looking like we'll have my $300 by the end of the week. But let's see. We'll wait and see. So I still need the magic of the Elwood City Limits faithful to help me recoup those costs.
Send him your energy. Well, I'm glad that at least we could keep you morally supported.
Thank you.
In the last 2 weeks.
It makes it all worth it.
Welcome, everybody. It's Elwood City Limits, the Episodic Arthur podcast. My name's Will Young. That's Lucas Mancini, who now has his luggage back, and hopefully his $300 will be on the way very soon.
I joke, but even better than the $300. I know you mentioned this in the mid-episode break, but folks, it's nomination time for the Best of Halifax Awards.
Right.
And so,
yes, thank you.
If you're listening to this, head on over to, is it coast.ca/vote, or is it vote.coast.ca? I should figure that out. I'm going to figure that out. But basically, it's our local alt weeklies, best of the city. And we are, of course, a Halifax podcast. We just recently interviewed a legendary Halifax figure, the Betamax King. Almost misnamed him. So ensure that if you like the show, the best way to support us besides subscribing to the Patreon is to go to vote.thecoast.ca, go to the podcast section, and say Elwood City Limits is your favorite podcast. And if it asks you for a zip code, just look up a McDonald's in Halifax and say you live there.
Well, I haven't had anybody note any problems. We've had people from Canada and I believe from the U.S. Also nominate us, which thank you everybody for doing that. But I haven't heard of anybody encountering any snafus or
they do that for a reason,
that would preclude them from doing that.
It can't hurt. There's lots of McDonald's here, so just hit up the Halifax McDonald's postal code just to be safe.
So yes, vote.thecoast.ca. You'll have to register with your email, name, and postal code or zip code. Then nominate Elwood City Limits under Best Podcast in the Music and Culture section. And if you do that, send us a message on either email or social media to let us know that you nominated, and we can thank you properly. And so the nomination, as it has been with all these other years, that's going to be step one. We're going to need another resurgence, hopefully in a few months when we are nominated for step two, which is voting. But we'll get to that. First, we have to get nominated. So vote.thecoast.ca, please, and thank you. And we also thank our emailers who have sent us a couple of messages over the past couple of weeks at elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. We're going to start off with this one from Bluge Agua, longtime listener. Dear Will, Lucas, and Mike, you guys are awesome, except Mike. I love listening to your podcast, especially when you get deep into the animal hierarchy. A couple of weeks ago in the Is What I Say episode, that was with Jason Schwimmer, you mentioned an extra layer of the animal hierarchy. So funny animals, anthropomorphic animals who wear clothes, regular animals that can communicate to babies and other regular animals, but not the funny adult/non-baby animals, and meaningless animals like the fly that was eaten by Mr. Toad. But I have a thought that may make your head explode. Remember the lice in Season 5, or Pepe the Flea? The last louse was killed, spoiler alert, at the end of the episode, repeatedly crying out, "Help me!" And we know that they had emotions and a rich inner life unknown to the funny animals. On the other hand, Mei Lin wanted Binky to kill Pepe when she first met him because he was a bug. So where would these two fall in the animal hierarchy?
So
how do we
Pepe's
tackle
easy.
this anymore?
Pepe's easy because the babies and the dogs communicate with Pepe. So Pepe, so he's on the same tier as the dogs and the babies. Now, we never saw the fleas interact with anybody else besides the fleas. So we got a big question mark on the fleas, and we can't talk to them and ask them because the last one died on screen, in brutal fashion. I'm trying to remember any other examples of this kind of weird middle ground. Do you remember the episode when, of course, everybody remembers this classic Arthur episode where Arthur scrapes his knee on the lima bean can? We kind of get to see the inner workings of Arthur's antibodies.
Yeah, but that was like a representation of what Brain was talking about. Okay. That was an imagination sequence. Okay. I wouldn't count that. It's hard. It's really hard to say. I'm not sure because where this begins, where this ends. I mean, you could drive yourself crazy. So, very interesting thought experiment, though. And we seem to have three classes of animals here that have different variations of understanding and perhaps even souls. Also, this has been bugging me for the longest time about Arthur. Why didn't we see birds or reptiles represented in the main cast? I think the show could have benefited from an alligator or duck in the Arthur cast. Well, as we always like to bring up, there was those couple of episodes in season 1 where they did have duck people, and then they just kind of never did again. It seemed to be a design that maybe they didn't really care for and didn't want to keep around. But yeah, it's like, especially when you watch a show today like BoJack Horseman, which really goes sometimes to extremes in fitting in animals into an anthropomorphic kind of representation. I imagine it was for the ease of the animators and just because it is. And with BoJack Horseman, a lot of those animals that you see that are besides horses and cats and like all those other things, or like if you see somebody who's a whale, you don't like see them all the time. It's like a one-time visual gag sometimes. So, my guess would be just ease of animation, and just maybe they just didn't end up liking the designs of the duck people, or whatever. Maybe they just didn't like really vibe with them past the first season.
It's tricky for the non-mammals, right? Because with the mammals, you basically just kind of draw a person and put some ears on them. Whereas the ducks, like a duck's head is so small in proportion to its body that when you make a duck have arms and legs like a human being, their head has to kind of get huge to match the rest of them. But then their head looks really big because we're not used to ducks' heads being that big. So I kind of understand why they only really do it as a throwaway gag. But I don't know, it'd be fun. You're right that I feel like with guests and stuff, they usually just go with the classic, make Matt Damon and throw some ears on him. Really the only animals these days where they kind of get outside the box are with the moose. I almost said mooses. The moose, like George or Art Garfunkel, is kind of the most non-standard as far as the regular Arthur main cast animals get.
Yeah, and I imagine with the ducks as well, it was probably like animating their bill was probably a little bit more trouble than it was worth. You don't really see ducks in the first season like talk very much. Like there's that one time, but that's from farther away. So I don't know. Apologies for the long email. Keep up the great work. P.S. I think that the falafel truck owner from Falafel wins the title of Throwaway Character of the Week. I agree with you, and I think that's a good guess for what Lucas's nomination would be. We got a couple here from Darkness Slayer X. So you guys are always saying that you usually like DW, even though many other people hate her, I guess. But has it ever once crossed your minds that perhaps her character is designed to attract the viewer's hatred towards her? I certainly can't think of a reason why the writers would make her such an utterly terrible sister to Arthur, if not to make her the character that the viewers would hate with a burning passion and therefore sympathize with Arthur more. Heck, she suggested to her dad that he should throw Arthur on the streets in Dad's dessert dilemma, which is just plain vile, even if she is just 4 years old. She actually used to be listed as a hate sink on TV tropes, but was later removed, which I don't agree with. So I think that the hate for DW is this feels a little pointed. This feels a little personal here. I gotta say, I don't feel that as many people absolutely hate DW. Like she's not Caillou. Like we've talked about Caillou before, and there's still a huge hatedom for Caillou. And by the way, any of our patrons who haven't listened to our episode of For the Kids, a PBS Kids podcast on Caillou, check it out. You might be surprised by how you feel about Caillou at the end of that one. But all that to say, DW obviously has some negative traits to her, and certainly doesn't end up in a great sense at the very, very end of Arthur, as we discussed this year. But a lot of what she says is not meant to be taken seriously, and usually isn't, because she's 4 years old, especially with the comment of like, I know what you're talking about, it's like, it was Arthur's idea, put him on the street first. And it's just like, obviously DW is often meant for humor. Yes. That's I think is her main role, is that she's meant to evoke a lot of humor, especially I think for older viewers who recognize that what she's saying is meant to be hyperbolic and all that sort of thing. I do know that, and this comes up whenever we talk about Arthur's big hit, there's a very big like feeling of, there's a lot of people who grew up with younger sisters, Lucas, you yourself included, and that can lead to complicated feelings sometimes, because not everybody is best friends with their siblings, or not everybody is even friendly with their siblings, and have a lot of, I think, resentment towards a figure like DW, who is often kind of left unpunished versus Arthur, or just kind of her what she says is brushed aside, whereas Arthur is taken more seriously. But again, that has to do with the fact that like she's 4 years old and Arthur is double her age, so there's a lot more responsibility that comes his way.
Yeah, I was going to even say, like, the inverse of that is true as well, in that, like, you know, because I had a younger sister, I know that sometimes kids say the darndest things, and sometimes, you know, kids can be petulant, and I'm like, some of y'all seem like you don't have younger siblings, because, yeah, younger siblings are tyrants. They're annoying, and that's kind of, I find, what makes the DW character funny, in a way, because it's a representation of that. I think what we're getting... what were you going to say?
It's especially because, like, if you're around little kids, like, it was so funny having my niece be 4 years old and just mentally, like, thinking to myself, because I haven't had much experience with kids, but just being like, she doesn't talk like DW at all. It's like, of course not. DW talks like she's a 12-year-old, which is where a lot of the humor comes from, of just, like, she has the same kind of attitude and moods as a 4-year-old, but she's a lot more erudite than they are, which makes it even more funny a lot of times.
I like that you brought up Caillou, because I think there's a telling comparison to be made. You know, for the uninitiated, there's a concept in wrestling called X-Pac heat, right?
Ooh, yeah.
In wrestling, there's bad guys, the heels, and their job is to make you dislike them. But not to the extent that you want to turn off your television because they're so annoying you don't want to watch them on TV. And I think Caillou is an example of X-Pac heat. He's so annoying that it transcends the logic of the show and seeps into the reality where you're like, I just don't want to watch this show anymore. The difference with DW is that often when she's tormenting Arthur and being, I agree, she'll be cruel. She'll call for him to be homeless and all this stuff. But to me, that's funny. Like, I get a kick out of it. Like
big time.
The more DW kind of leans into being this tyrant, to being this nuisance, the more I'm kind of entertained, because I think it's all really funny. Whereas with a Caillou, there's not really like humor or like joke writing in it. It's just kind of him complaining and screeching and being annoying, which I think is way more annoying.
when he's the protagonist of the show, and it's a really difficult needle to thread a lot of times to like be able to show somebody as being dislikable while also keeping them as the main character in your show. I mean, especially early in Arthur, like a lot of the, you look at a lot of the material for Arthur, or a lot of the way that it's pitched is like DW is, in a sense, as our emailer said, meant to be perceived as a nuisance to Arthur, but by the fact that this is a show that is meant to feature different viewpoints and broaden the depths of different characters, a lot of that kind of goes by the wayside after a while, because DW ends up being a secondary protagonist to the fact of like, now that we're watching Arthur in season 14, like DW gets her own episodes frequently, and they are meant for a certain subsection of the audience that I believe is around her age. At least that's how they seem to be written. So I don't think she was written to be hated. I think that she was written to be a foil to Arthur, which is much different. And, there's few examples of people, outside of professional wrestling, which we could name all day, I'm sure. But, there's not many examples of characters that are meant to be like, your reaction is meant to be revulsion. The one I think of is like Elmira from Tiny Toons, where it's like, you're meant to dislike her, and the humor is from how annoying she is, or that's what is intended. But there's a generation of people, I'm guessing, Lucas, probably you and me, who watch Tiny Toons, or God help you, Pinky, Elmira, and the Brain, who were like, I hate this. Like, I hate watching this. Why is this funny? Like, every time that Elmira was on Tiny Toons, I would change the channel or just stop watching TV because I just didn't like her. And I've almost never felt that way about DW, and certainly not as an older person who can take this a little less seriously. So, interesting way to think about it, I suppose.
The final note is just like, for me personally, like DW is mean. She's cruel, but to me, it's less of like an annoying thing and more of like, she's like, for lack of a better term, she's taking the piss out of those around her. Like, there's no other characters on Arthur, with the exception of maybe Muffy, that have quote-unquote savage moments compilations on YouTube, right? Like, sometimes
like
DW
Binky, maybe
is like a Rodney Dangerfield type, where she like walks into the room and just starts taking apart all the people that are in it, right? That's more so her role. And so to me, that's just good comedy. That's just funny.
Sure.
So that's how I think of her.
Because she can get away with it because she's younger.
Exactly.
And but it's not like she never faces consequences. She does every now and then. So the other part to Darkness Slayer X's question doesn't have to do with Arthur at all. What are your plans after you're done analyzing every episode of Arthur? Do you plan to start a podcast about another topic or retire from podcasting altogether? I was originally going to answer this privately, but I figured that I think it's worth putting out there, and because it's not something we're hiding. I have always had the internal philosophy with this show that as long as we're having fun, we'll keep doing it. And when it becomes not fun anymore, then we'll probably stop. And I just want to let everybody know, I almost want to say to prepare you, but it's just like, we're not ending anytime soon. Don't get me wrong. We're still having fun. We're still doing this. We're going to be trying new stuff eventually, and around Elwood City Limits, and, seeing if stuff works. You try some new stuff, see if it works. But yeah, I always felt that as long as we were both enjoying what we were doing and could find the time to have it in our lives, then we'll keep doing it until Arthur ends. And then when that happens, we'll consider the road ahead. But I also just want to put it out there. You guys know how much Arthur is ahead of us. So there's a very real possibility that we may not finish it all. And I just want to say that, we're going to try, but be prepared for this to not be a complete Arthur covering of seasons 1 to 25. We're all going to have to be okay with that if that's where it comes to. So who knows right now? Like, we're going to keep going ahead. We're going to keep trucking, and we'll see is what I will say. But also be prepared for this to not be, a comprehensive episode, like complete episode guide to Arthur. That would be awesome, but that's going to require years and years of more work. So
we'll
a lot can happen in even just 1 year.
We'll see how bad those Flash episodes are. You know what I mean? A lot of it's going to depend on that. But no, not to be all doom and gloom. I think I totally agree with Will that it's completely predicated on how much fun we're having. We're still having fun today. I was thinking to myself, I'm looking forward to talking about these 2 Arthur episodes. And as long as I still have that feeling, we'll do it. And then, hey, maybe we do finish all of Arthur and we still have that feeling, and then we got to find something else, which, remains to be seen. Yeah, don't be sad that it's over, folks. Be happy that it's happened. And right now it's happening. We're talking about Arthur.
Oh, yeah. This isn't going anywhere. At least we're not planning for it to go anywhere immediately.
Live in the moment.
Next one's from... What's that?
Oh, I just said you got to live in the moment. Buddhism.
Mm-hmm. Next one's from Eric from New Jersey. The episode Around the World in 11 Minutes, probably the most Rugrats I've ever seen from the Pal Kate universe. The cut between fantasy and real-life scenes definitely feels like how the Rugrats formula felt. Down to Nemo basically being an Angelica archetype as the foil to the main 4. This week's episode, Arthur Unravels, is an episode I've been waiting for, mainly for that one fantasy scene that everyone memes about. The question may have been asked before, but who is a guest star you wished would have been on Arthur? For me, it has to be Weird Al. He already cameoed in a lot of animated shows as himself or playing a similar character. I always thought an episode with him and Buster would work so well. If you remember the song My Brain from Arthur's Really Rockin' Music Mix, to me it sounds exactly like a Weird Al song and would fit right in the show. Take care and have a great day. I'm sure we've talked about this question in some regard before, and I apologize. I'm never terribly good on the spot, but Weird Al is a really good one. I feel like semi-recently I was like, I wish the show had been around for this person, but I can't remember who that would have been.
Was it Stavros Halkias?
No.
he would play the brain. Okay, a couple of weeks back, someone was asking about our live-action casting. There's a big key right there. That's a big key if I ever saw one. We'd have to give him lifts to make him taller, I guess, but...
He's a little too chill to be Binky.
On a mean streak? We got to get him... Yeah, I guess he needs to be a little bit more of a... Binky's pretty chill these days.
I suppose. Okay. Celebrity... I feel like there's a lot of musicians that we could have tapped into, especially, when you think about some of the guests we've had, like Frank Gehry, where it's just like, who cares? No disrespect to Frank Gehry, but it's also just like, this is a kid's show. What are we doing? I know it's probably the PBS connection. But I feel like there were a lot of musicians and kind of people who are more active now, or were active. I almost wish, you could take somebody like, I don't know, like a Billie Eilish. I know she's been on The Simpsons, but it would be cool to see what she would do. And they have had, I think that's another thing is that Arthur often, I know I kind of laughed about Frank Gehry, but they have had a lot of celebrity guest stars. I think about even in the later years, they've had really important people guest star on the show. And really bucking the whole thing of they have to be celebrities or nobody will care. And
I gotta get one.
No,
Werner Herzog.
I think I'm sure we've talked about this. This is from me going through all of the episodes again to put on YouTube. I'm certain we've talked about how we wish Werner Herzog was on the show. I think maybe that's my answer too.
Okay, I mean it's just you could picture him be like, why do the animals go on all fours, but the other animals, they stand.
And he knows he's in a cartoon?
Yeah, he would just be asking, and he's asking questions. He's like, why does the bunny speak? Why does the bunny eat such disgusting things? What is about the bunny that makes him eat this so?
Let's go with Werner Herzog for now. I think that's a good safety answer. If I think of anything else, I'll let you know.
The listener earlier, he'd be like, why is the little girl so annoying?
DW and Werner Herzog, man, that's where we really missed a trick there. Next one's from Amity. Hello, Will, Lucas, and Mike. Thinking back to the old podcast episodes, I remember you two have some super strange and baffling music tastes. Not liking Bare Naked Ladies? Wonderwall? Come on, guys. These are great songs. Okay, I'm sure we've clowned on Wonderwall in the 6 years we've been doing this. Did I ever say, or is that you?
That's me. I don't like Wonderwall, and I like Oasis. I just hate the song Wonderwall. I will say this.
No, Bare Naked Ladies.
Oh,
do you not like them?
I think that must have been in jest because I like to make fun of Bare Naked Ladies. Chickadee China,
sure.
The Chinese chicken. But Bare Naked Ladies is we're Canadian, Will. We have to, at a certain point, just accept that it's in our culture. Like, there's a Bare Naked Ladies song about how much they don't like Halifax. Like, we just gotta embrace Bare Naked Ladies fandom. Like, I don't know. It's definitely, a friend of mine came up with this concept, and I think it rings true, that there is a category of music called annoying music. And just because a music is annoying doesn't mean it's bad. And for example, I challenged him on that. I was like, okay, well, like, what's an example of, like, good annoying music? And he said, Animal Collective. And I was like, oh, damn, that's definitely true. Another example would be, like, Blade, right? Like, there's a category of music that's, like, annoying.
I don't know any of these people.
You should look these up afterwards, Will, and you'll be like, wow, Lucas was right. This is good, but also it's really annoying. And I think Bare Naked Ladies is firmly in that category, where it is, like, you could really annoy someone by playing 1 week and over again, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad song.
No, I mean, I like BNL, fine. So if I ever said anything to the contrary, I don't know what I was saying. Wonderwall, I mean, it's fine. It's just got overplayed. It's unfortunately it belongs to the ages now in the worst way. Check out Neil C.C. Arriga's Wonderwall, but with all the vowels taken out. Like, just look that up on YouTube. It's a scream. It's really funny. Amity continues, is there any non-Arthur or PBS-related show you've been checking out, like Owl House or Amphibia? And if there was an Arthur version of Knives Out, who would play who? Okay, let's start with any non-Arthur or PBS-related shows you've been checking out. So, my wife, Jenna, got Amazon Prime. Well, I guess we both did. So, I've been looking through a couple of shows on there. I watched all of Invincible. I liked that. That was good. I watched the first 2 seasons of The Boys. It's fine. Like, I thought it was okay. Like, I don't really feel anything about it is the problem. My wife and I are secret Purge heads. We really like the Purge movies. So we watched the first 2 episodes of the Purge series that is on Amazon Prime. It was, it's not especially good, but we might come back to it. And I watched the first 2 episodes of The Stand, the update of it from 2020, Stephen King's The Stand. Again, it's fine, but I am also like, you know what? I think I actually liked that mid-90s, like 6-hour television event a little bit better. So that's what I've been watching TV-wise. Lucas?
I don't really watch TV. I mean, I've been watching AEW Dynamite every Wednesday.
Oh yeah, me too.
It's continues to be even when I don't like it, I'm like, wow, there's good wrestling every week. Must have been what it was like in the 90s or something. This is crazy.
It's mostly a real treat.
The other thing, I started watching Spy Family, the anime.
Oh yeah,
and that is really it's really good, because my big problem with modern anime has been that it's kind of infantilizing, and there's an overimportance on teenaged and younger than teenage characters, and the older I get, the more unrelatable it becomes. And Spy Family is a great balance, because it's about a family, and so there's the main guy who's of course an adult spy, but they still get their kind of moe cute stuff in with the little girl, so it's a good balance. Right. And so I found that show really refreshing. And it's also not a show about a guy getting hit by a car and going into another world, which every anime seems to be these days. So it's really been a breath of fresh air.
Your beloved isekai.
Yeah, right. And then, I mean, the last show I watched that I really liked was How To with John Wilson, which we talked about last week. I've been watching a lot of Top Gear. I've been getting into Top Gear and watching all the old Top Gear specials and watching the Grand Tour. But that's not really new TV, so yeah.
Yeah. I also don't really watch a lot of TV. Like, I'm really seeding more into movies and TV, honestly. Like, I'm a little over it, so it's not something I do all the time. I actually watch a lot more YouTube than I do TV. That's kind of superseded TV for me. Arthur version of Knives Out, that just really makes me want Daniel Brochu to like record some of Daniel Craig's lines in the Buster voice and just try to say. I just want to see what his Kentucky accent sounds like. I feel like Brain would be the one to say "eat" to everybody, or I guess maybe I just want him to. So He can be the Chris Evans role. Oh gosh, I watched this semi recently, so I'm just trying to remember all the parts. What's her name? Ana de Armas, who's the most likable character on the show. Probably Sue Ellen. I can see Sue Ellen going into that role. And then the kid, the neo-Nazi kid. I don't know. I guess maybe some people want that to be DW. I don't know. It's a good question. I would actually really welcome our listeners if you have any fan casting for the Arthur remake of Knives Out. Please let us know. That's kind of my off the cuff thoughts there. Thanks, Amity. Last one here from Funith. This is about one of your recent episodes reviewing Buster Baxter and the Letter from the Sea, particularly that bit where Arthur says he'll help Buster out with the labor if it meant they could do something together. I related to that real hard because it reminded me of whenever my best friend asks me for help with chores, either personal or family related, I'm more than happy to do it since it means we can hang out and I can escape from my house. Are there any other bits in the show that get to you in such a way? So like bits from the show that you relate to on a personal level. There's so many specific moments that it could be. Like I think I would generally say that the moments where the kids are especially nice to each other, especially in like really tense scenarios, are really like, they don't remind me necessarily of my childhood, but there's such an idealization of kids that it really warms my heart. Like I think immediately about like when Arthur split his pants and then Binky just like shielded him away and just like completely took charge of that situation. Like I think that's really sweet. And he like Arthur didn't ask for help and Binky just gave him help. And it was cool that it was Binky too, you know?
I guess my example of that would be anytime that Arthur and DW like team up against their parents, like when they put their differences aside. I've mentioned it before the show, but me and my sister have the exact same age gap as Arthur and DW, and so that reminded me of many moments from my own life of putting our sometimes the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and us putting our differences aside to team up against our parents.
I think I'll also say that the moment of, and I know that a lot of people relate to this, but, the moment of Buster leaving in the second season, it does hit home because it reminds you of all the times that, when you were younger and a friend had to leave to go to another school or just moved away. And it also just reminds you that, like, that moment of Arthur chasing after the car doesn't happen in real life usually. They either leave and you get to say goodbye, or they leave and you never do. And I'm not sure which one is worse. So that one definitely affects me, as I'm sure as it does many other people. Thanks, everybody, for your emails. ElwoodCityLimits@gmail.com. That ran a bit longer than I thought, so not to give them any less respect, but let's quickly talk about our patrons at patreon.com/ElwoodCityLimits. We just had a great episode of For the Kids, a PBS Kids podcast, which is our Patreon exclusive podcast, talking about other shows on PBS Kids. We were talking about the Berenstain Bears, everything to do with the Berenstain Bears. I had a really good time recording that. I think we both did. And if you want to check it out, you just have to sign up. It's pay what you want, and you can become one of our patrons just like new patrons, Sid Ups, Wolf Lover Zodiac, and Ash. We also have great patrons in their own right, like Shanna Keegan, Uriel Underwood, Josh Andallo, Katie and Laura Ashley, Ricardo A. Soto, Infra90, J-Wags, Charlie Heckman, Gabby S. We have 3 pages now? Oh my God. Usually I have to wait to go to the second page, and now I have 3 to choose from. Greenhouse Vinyls, Sydney Long, we have Marlo Stanfield, and we have Jake Bailey and Light Relentless. And I'm going to go to the very last page. I think there might be just one person on there, and if it isn't our friend, it's loading, it's loading, it's loading. Yes, I know I said we have to get to the episode. It's Leanne S. Of course it is. So cool. Now we have 3 pages of patrons. Thanks, everybody. We really appreciate your support, and we have a lot to show for it if you join us at patreon.com/ElwoodCityLimits. Dozens and dozens of hours of extra ECL content. Okay, so today we're talking about Arthur Unravels in Season 14. This one starts, okay, it wasn't where I thought it was going to. We're going to get to where I thought it was going to start later, I suppose, with Arthur, Buster, and Binky as scientists and explorers who are looking for the Temple of Zuthamano. I believe that was how they pronounced it. And it seems to be, it almost reminded me of, this is not really my reference to make, but Legends of the Hidden Temple?
Yeah.
Reminded me of Olmec a little bit. Is that his name?
Yes, I believe it is Olmec. That Legends of the Hidden Temple, I think, is more of an American phenomenon.
Yeah.
I only really know about it from American podcasters talking about it as a standard in their youth.
Yeah.
But I've absorbed enough of it via context clues to think that that's kind of what this is like.
So they eventually are on the run after disturbing this temple, and they want to escape over a chasm, and Buster and Binky using very pointed language here. If only we had a bit of rope, or if we had some kind of clothing, like maybe a scarf. They want to escape via a scarf. But Arthur, so he has knitting materials, including a scarf in his backpack, but he doesn't want to admit that he has them. So it potentially leaves them in a perilous situation, and we never get the resolution to that. Thankfully, it's just a fantasy. The episode has to do with Arthur discovering knitting. So Grandma Thora, when they're inside on a rainy day, demonstrates knitting to Arthur and DW. And Arthur is at first a little reluctant about it, but he ends up showing an aptitude for it. So first of all, when they're inside on a rainy day, they are watching the TV. And at first I thought they were doing a thing where like the rain or the wind was interfering with like the antenna or something, you know, that old chestnut that used to be in cartoons. But no, they've actually updated it. They now know the pain Arthur and DW do of scratched DVDs that go all the way back to the beginning when you try to play them. I thought this is great.
Yeah, this is very much like making me feel like a quote-unquote elder millennial moment, right? Like,
yeah.
Kids, there used to be the DVD would be scratched, and you would... And, like, the moment where... they're talking about, like, it played a little bit further this time. That's really the pain of, like, some weird thing would happen with scratched DVDs where it doesn't quite go back at the same part every time. And so you hope in your heart of hearts, it's like, oh, we're going a little bit further this time. Like, maybe we'll see the rest of the movie. And then it goes back.
Yeah. And then usually what happens is you have to skip that scene altogether. There's just dead zones of certain DVDs that you own. And especially happens, you know, I get DVDs from the library all the time, and those can be just in any condition. And so sometimes it's just like, we got to skip this scene altogether, or else it'll just ruin our watching experience even more. So I thought that was a great reference. So yeah, we get a little bit of a tutorial here from Grandma Thora of like the basics of knitting. I have to be honest, even after they, like a children's show, explained it to me via explanation, description, and visually, I kind of still don't get knitting. I don't really get how it's supposed to work. I think I might be too dumb for it.
Yeah, it is one of those things where when you don't understand the mechanics, it's just like, that's not real, that's magic or whatever. You're just, you're casting some sort of spell. Though I will say this, to skip ahead, when they do the knit, did you see the words from Us Kids this week?
I did, yeah.
The Word from Us Kids tutorial is the closest I've ever been to understanding the actual mechanics of knitting. Not so much this one that Grandma Thora gives, but later on when we actually see a kid talk about, and I never realized that there was like instructions and like different code names for the different types of stitching or whatever. That's the most I've ever understood knitting.
It feels like when you're trying to learn how to tie your shoes and people are explaining to you how to do it, but until you actually understand the physicality that goes into tying your shoes, like the explanation kind of doesn't, it's almost meaningless, you know? So I feel like I'm at that point with knitting. So yeah, Arthur's a little bit reluctant. He thinks it might be a little boring, but Grandma references, so I thought this was a historical character, or a historical figure, a woman named Madame Defarge, who encoded secret messages in her knitting. And that's true, but Madame Defarge, and thanks again to the Arthur Wiki for this assist, is a character from Charles Dickens's A Tale of Two Cities. And while she did encode secret messages in her knitting, she's not really a heroic character. In fact, apparently she's the villain of that book. So she does so in a less altruistic way, and this leads into a fantasy of Arthur imagining that he's a spy encoding. He's like Alan Turing in The Imitation Game, except he's doing stuff with knitting instead of with old computers. But, you know, A Tale of Two Cities takes place during the French Revolution. So the Madame Defarge connection is really a strange one to make, I guess. But I guess there aren't any other historical figures that are, like, known for their knitting.
Yeah, I also think that, like, it makes sense that was a literary character who was doing that, because when they brought out this fact, I was like, is this true? Was someone actually sending code messages and knitting? And so I'm glad you looked that up. All this stuff in the imagination sequence where Arthur is a spy, again, extra tickled me because I've been watching Spy Family, and I'm like, all this fake kind of East Germany stuff is top of mind for me. So I thought this was a kind of a fun segment. Everybody's in their waistcoats and their kind of like spy gear.
Yeah, they're trench coats, and then Buster is wearing like a garishly knitted hat, as quote unquote not to draw attention to himself. Oh, we also get a cameo from El Boomerang in this imagination, where Buster kicks El Boomerang and accidentally kicks it into Binky. So very bad as a spy in Arthur's imagination. So that keeps going. So Arthur does express an interest. He spends all day knitting. So Grandma Thora decides to encourage him and get him his own yarn and needles. And we go to the Yarn Yurt is the name of this, which, good name.
It is a yurt, too, on the inside.
And who do we see there but Dr. Fugue? It's another Dr. Fugue cameo. Really glad to see him again. He's established to be someone who knits, and he even has opinions on the colors of yarns, because Arthur picks up a yarn and he says it's pink, and Dr. Fugue says, "That's not pink, it's fuchsia. Pink is simple, like a sea shanty. Fuchsia is an oboe concerto with hints of atonality." Great stuff. I love this character. I'm so glad we're using him more, and that we use him even more later on in this episode. So, of course, you have Arthur and knitting, and the whole episode is Arthur being embarrassed to admit that he likes knitting. Are we done with this? Like, yeah. This is so old hat by now. The whole thing of, like, it used to be that Arthur doesn't want people to think he's a baby, but now it's like Arthur doesn't want to be embarrassed. Now, the reason he gives is that, you know, first he's like, he doesn't want to knit because he thinks it might be boring. And then the kind of implicit, explicit thing here is that he feels that, like, knitting is for girls, which, if I were to put that a little further, I think that if this was a show for a little bit of an older audience, I feel like Arthur would be afraid that people would think he's gay because he knits. But it is like, I think it is just he doesn't want people to think he's a girl or really think less of him. And I'm just like, man, this is such a rote Arthur story to have now. It's just, we've done this so many times in all of its permutations, it feels like.
Exactly. Not just with the Arthur character. That I had the exact same note, which was that we've had this exact storyline twice with Binky. First, Binky was embarrassed about ballet. And almost the exact same kind of dynamic, too, right? Like, ballet, a traditionally feminine activity, though I'll have you know that Jason Statham does ballet. But ballet, you know, he was scared that people would make fun of him because it's feminine. Exact same thing as Arthur with knitting. But then we also had this episode again with Binky hiding that he liked reading. Remember that? When he was, like, reading and he didn't want people to know?
Yes, yeah.
So
that was a running joke.
I agree with you that I feel like this is well-worn territory, and at this point it just feels old. And it also feels like, of the permutations of this kind of story, this one is the least original of an angle. Like, it's just kind of like he's embarrassed by knitting, and then everybody's like, oh, actually, knitting's pretty cool, and then he accepts himself. And there's not really any twists or turns along that journey.
Yeah. By the way, apologies for any background noise. I have to keep my window open because it's so friggin' close in my apartment. It's so warm. I just need air coming from somewhere. So apologies if the audio has any background noise in it. Binky is outside of the yarn yurt, and this is where we get the first thing of, like, Arthur trying to cover it up. That, you know, he doesn't say that he's knitting, but he says he's using needles to send secret messages, There's this cool shot, actually, where Arthur is walking away from Binky, and we rack focus from, like, Binky to Arthur. Like, did you notice that? I thought that was really cool. I did notice that.
That's one of two very cinematic moments in this episode. There's another one where Arthur's knitting in the bathroom, and he drops his ball of yarn. And then there's this really crazy shot that's from under the door looking up at Binky. I don't know what that angle's called, but it's very cinematic, where like Binky almost looks warped because we're looking up at him, so his like feet are really big and his head's really small. So good, for lack of a better term, cinematography. I guess storyboarding, I guess, would be the term in animation.
Yeah,
yeah. You know, we've had some complaints about the animation in these season 14 episodes, but I'll say that the actual like art designer, the framing in this episode in particular, was standout.
Yeah, it's really good to see that the ambition of the animators and the directors and the artists is still there. Like, Arthur has had some really ambitious and interesting cinematography, for lack of a better word, from the very beginning, and it's really cool to see it still there. What I find interesting is that, so Arthur tells Buster about knitting and presumably teaches him how to do it. Buster adopts knitting without shame. Like, they are knitting outside because Arthur doesn't want anybody to see him knit. And then Buster's like, "What? Who cares? Like we have to go inside. Who cares if anybody sees you?" So it's really cool right away that Arthur, this is all, of course, Arthur is a textbook case of capital A anxiety. So this is your non-anxious friend telling you that you're overthinking things, which I have a couple of those, and I need them. So yeah, this is really at the front of Arthur's mind. In fact, so much that there is a presentation that Mr. Ratburn gives about the colonial era of America, when you could be potentially outed for doing something that people thought was unfavorable or suspicious. And that leads into a dream that Arthur has, and this is an Arthur meme alert here, because this scene of Arthur, and they're in colonial garb again. This is something they go back to, not all the time, but every once in a while, we get like a colonial flashback or dream sequence, and Arthur, it's almost like the Scarlet Letter or something. Arthur is being outed, so to speak, as somebody who knits, but what they say is they put like a capital K on his garments, much like the Scarlet Letter, and they use the term Knitter, and you can find this on YouTube. You, like, every once in a while you see it on social media, and just like, can you believe Arthur went there? And it's like, yeah. Maybe they should have thought about that and how that would sound.
It does sound a little strange, I will say.
It does. It's awkward.
It's like, obviously there's nothing strange about the phrase a knitter, one who knits.
Yes,
but
that's what we're saying.
But when it does sound a little strange when it's yelled at someone in an accusatory, like, I feel like this is the only instance I've ever seen of someone yelling at someone, he is a knitter, he and then they all start saying knitter, and so it's the framing that makes it weird, and so that's why, of course, it's been a clip that people take out of context. I think, I don't know, maybe the Arthur writers' minds are so innocent that they never even conceived that someone would take this out of context, or they're such nice people that it would never even occur to them that word sounds like maybe a really terrible other word. I don't know. It's kind of a shame too, because it is a funny moment. I like the idea of like Arthur being. It's like he's getting put to death, or there's going to be publicly scolded, like it's the Crucible or something.
It almost looks like he's at a hanging post or something.
Yeah. It's pretty intense punishment for being someone who knits. But yes, you can look up the clip for yourself if you want to see why there's much ado about this Arthur segment.
Yeah. Arthur still trying to keep it under wraps. Mrs. McGrady, Grandma Thor apparently told Mrs. McGrady, and she tries to talk to him about it. in the lunch line, and she unveils a knitting project she has called Tyrannosaurus Eggplant, which I thought looked pretty cool. And I should mention, all the while, Arthur has this knitting project that he's doing. He's trying to knit a scarf. So while he's at lunch, the scarf escapes from his bag by accident, and the brain uncovers it, and like nobody is necessarily making fun of him right away. And so it's in fact, it's a little weird. Like, Arthur he denies it, like, outwardly and loudly to Mrs. McGrady, but then when he's dead to rights, he turns around, he's just like, yeah, you know what, I do knit, so there. And it's like, nobody in that vicinity, in that shot, really had any strong feelings about it. It's only when he leaves to go outside and Binky and the tough customers initially laugh at him. Again, Binky kind of using, he's not calling him a girl, but he's like referring to him by a girl version of his name and kind of being like prancy. It's weird that Binky is the one to do this, but like, well, I guess we needed somebody.
Okay, before we move on from the Mrs. McGrady scene, I know we're going a little bit long-winded this week. I just stumbled across a crazy Easter egg in this episode. If you go to 10:35 and pause it right when Arthur is looking at Francine while Mrs. McGrady is talking about knitting, if you look at Francine's milk carton, there seems to be like a photo of some guy, and it's not like animated. It's just like a picture of a guy, like not an Arthur character or anything. As like missing on the carton. I can't believe I've caught this. I just noticed this now. I don't know if this is like someone on the staff, like one of the writers or animators or something, but it's literally just like a not animated photo of like some dude.
Really? I'm gonna flip to this as we talk about it. Yeah, so Binky is the one, and the tough customers kind of join in laughing. Oh, you're right. It is a real dude. Oh man, okay.
What is that? It's kind of. I was like, is this torrent edited? Like, what's up with that guy?
That's just a JPEG of a man. Is what like a human man. Man, good eye, Lucas. I totally missed. Like, it's your eye isn't drawn towards it. That shouldn't be. But who interrupts the tough customers' bullying but Dr. Fugue with a flash of lightning? Dr. Fugue comes in and to kind of save Arthur in a sense, but he is very complimentary of Arthur's multicolored scarf that also Muffy was very complimentary of as well. Again, Arthur faced, except for the tough customers, like nobody else was making fun of Arthur for this. This was entirely in his head as usual. And he invites Arthur to his knitting club, which is Dr. Fugue, Mrs. McGrady, Oliver Frensky, and Rattles from the Tough Customers. So we get that kind of like, again, it feels a little limp of just like, oh, it turns out the tough guy likes the girly thing. So it's like, and Dr. Fugue says that like knitting is not for. He has a line that's like, knitting isn't just for boys and for girls. And I was like, hell yeah, Dr. Fugue resents the gender binary. But it's just like, he says that, and then he also makes fun of Binky for doing ballet, and it feels like we're trying to have it both ways, and I didn't really appreciate it. And
I was glad he at least like brought up Binky being in ballet, though. True. I was thinking the same thing as you of like, it's really weird to have Binky be the one that's going the hardest at Arthur, because it's like, Binky, you were in this exact situation, and also now at this point, everybody knows you do ballet, right? So it's just weird. I'm like, is no one acknowledging that, like, why is Binky of all people going the hardest at Arthur for this?
Yeah, seriously. And at the end of the episode, Binky is getting interested in knitting as well, as Arthur is more open about his interest. We mentioned it before, but now a word from us kids.
And now a word from us kids.
It's real kids who are also into knitting. It's a brother and a sister, I believe. They are knitting bracelets and a hacky sack. So hacky sacks, still a thing in like 2010.
Of course, okay. Will. You didn't have kids who had already graduated from your high school showing up to your high school to sell kids cigarettes and play hacky sack with them at lunch? Because I sure did.
Oh, gross. So yeah, it's just about how much these kids like knitting and all that sort of thing. Yeah, all cool. You can see them go through the process, talk about how it's relaxing and all this kind of thing. I just want to say, I forget which one. One of these kids really needs to blow their nose. They sound very stuffed up. And that's all I'll say about that. We will get into the second half of this particular Arthur episode right after this.
Hey everybody, it's Lucas from the Elwood City Limits podcast, and if you love ECL, there's a couple of ways to keep up with us. You could go to facebook.com/Elwood City Limits, at ECL Podcast, that's our Twitter. We take questions on Tumblr. It's elwoodcitylimits.tumblr.com. There is an Instagram as well, Elwood City Limits on Instagram. Of course, if you want to donate to the show and get exclusive content, whether that's our full-length commentary of the Arthur movies, our brand new bi-weekly PBS Kids review show, as well as our video game movie reviews with the Sonic movie review and Pikachu movie review, you can check out patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. And that's also going to get you access to the Elwood City Limits Discord, which me and Will like to post in from time to time. And if you want that sweet, sweet Elwood City Limits merch, check out teespring.com/stores/Elwood-City-Limits-store. You can listen to the podcast at libsyn.com/Elwood City Limits, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and there's other podcast apps like Stitcher, and if we're not on your favorite app, let us know. And where can you let us know? Well, that's going to be at elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. That's also where you can send us a question, and we'll read it on the show. Finally, if you want to support the podcast, the best way to do so is to tell a friend who likes animation or Arthur or just podcasts in general, and to go to our iTunes page and rate us out of 5 stars. Apparently, that helps podcasts out. Bye, everybody!
And now, back to Arthur.
This one is all the rage, and it's a Muffy episode. So the cold open is Muffy's House of Fashion Horrors, which the cold open rarely adheres to reality, so I'm not taking this seriously. But I love the implication that Muffy bought a whole haunted house to just dunk on her friend's clothes. Because the exhibits in the haunted house are just like, it's like, look at this hideous outfit, and it's just Arthur. And he's like, what's wrong with what I wear? Or like the one time Francine wore an ugly dress, and it's just like, man, Muffy, this is an exorbitant way to just diss your friends. But
It's
in
a
fairness,
lot of money to say, what are those?
the Muffy's House of What Are Those? And then, but she's also making, this isn't, she says it's not supposed to be part of the House of Horrors, but her own fashion faux pas is on display, which we will get filled in as the episode goes on. This episode was full of surprises in a couple of ways. For example, Muffy is way into a show that is hosted by a woman named Candy Coco, but featuring returning Capri DeVapida.
Yes, the Paris Hilton stand-in of the Arthur universe.
Right. I don't know if you were on the first episode that she was in. This was a couple of episodes ago. That might have been me and Peebs. But she has appeared before. So, like, the name Capri DeVapida is 100% just like a Paris Hilton joke. And as Peebs and I talked about in that episode, 2010, it's kind of lazy and it doesn't hold up great.
No,
it's just like it's a little too easy, honestly.
It speaks to the era of people being like, I'm gonna go see House of Wax because I can't wait for Paris Hilton to die. Like, there was a real kind of a mean streak towards the female celebrities in the early 2000s, and this is kind of it's like she's and some people are not doing it in bad faith or whatever. What is she famous for? She's rich and famous for being rich and famous or whatever. But I agree that it's got the trappings of, let's say, a lazy late night talk show host.
Yeah, and especially when it's like the whole thing with Capri DeVapida is she's saying that's warm, and it's like, get it? Because Paris Hilton said that's hot. I'm just like, come on, guys. Like, I think we could do a little bit better than this.
I will say they do good stuff with That's Warm. When Capri DeVapida goes, being cool is warm.
So Muffy is inspired to throw out a lot of her old outfits because they're not warm. I will say also, they are doing this show in the canals of Venice, and El Boomerang floats by. So again, there goes El Boomerang. Follow up with that at a later date. Muffy donates her old clothes to, again, another return, Care to Wear, which is the used clothing store owned by Buzz Vallette.
who was at a time, I believe, throwaway character of the week. So
How
no
could
longer,
he not be, Lucas? Lucas, have you looked at the man?
I know. I was. He really is Arthur's first quote unquote hipster character. What is he gonna get a coffee and wear some skinny jeans and listen to the Fleet Foxes? I mean, look at this guy. Get some microbrews. No. I'm glad that he's not a throwaway character. You know, it's characters like these. I remember the first time we saw him, we were like, oh, this is like a standout kind of interesting character design. And it's always those types of characters that I'm glad keep showing up. Even in these late seasons. I like it when they introduce new people and then keep them coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. So Buzz is there. He's very happy to receive Muffy's old clothes. And Muffy notices some some fashion that she's never seen before, and Buzz teaches her about fads. So she sees like poodle skirts or toe socks, which I had a pair of toe socks. I almost didn't realize they were a fad, but yeah, I guess so. You don't really see people proudly proclaiming that they own toe socks anymore. Muffy is interested in creating her own fad. She has a little interaction here with Sue Ellen. She's dropping off this like I describe it as like it's like a hat. It's like an open-face balaclava almost.
So these, it's funny, this episode of Arthur's really prescient. I'll get into why exactly later on, but these are a real thing. I've seen them described as like a knit hood. Like it's just a hood that's detachable. And I'll get into why I'm familiar with them a little bit later on in the episode.
So Muffy's getting rid of it because she thinks it isn't warm, and Sue Ellen likes it. She says, I like it. And then Muffy says, of course you like it. I'm just like, screw you, Muffy. That's so mean. Yeah, so Muffy's trying to create her own fads, things that'll catch on. She accidentally invents belts first, which I thought was funny.
Yes, Bailey goes, I believe it's called a belt, Miss Muffy. Bailey kind of giving the Travis Scott line, you know, Muffy asking, would this hold up my pants? And Bailey going, belt. So we get a little string here of the fads that Muffy tries to keep going. The first one is ankle pouches, which is like a coin purse that goes around your ankle like an ankle weight. These are kind of cool. I feel like they're kind of techwear or gorpcore, you know, like dudes who are into buying all the most expensive like Arc'teryx and Solomon shoes and all that crazy stuff, you know, the North Face Supreme collab, and they want as many zippers and Velcro pockets as possible. I could see them pulling off the ankle pouches. Also, did you notice that Bailey invents Crocs?
I was wondering, like, I didn't exactly hear what he was talking about, so I knew that he was saying...
What about colorful shoes with holes on the top? And he was like, Docs, Mocs.
Oh,
and then
that's it.
Muffy interrupts him. And again, it's funny how cyclical fashion is. Like, it literally is on just a 10-year loop. Because this would be at the point where Crocs were brand new, and then they became deeply, deeply uncool. And we are now full circle where people like Crocs again. So it's all you had to do was wait 10 years, and this episode of Arthur is like oddly prescient.
That's been a weird one to live through. Yeah, so the ankle pouches are for Muffy's coins. They like burst as soon as she like trips on them. Binky straight up robs her. Like just all the coins spill on the ground. He just makes off with them. Like, okay. Muffy invents the Snacko scarf, which is basically a giant fruit by the foot in scarf form.
This is our worst idea.
The flavors are sassy saffron, classy cranberry, and elegant edamame, to which Buster says, that's the best tasting scarf I've ever owned. I actually thought this was kind of an okay idea, especially it just kind of looks like giant bubble tape almost, or giant fruit by the foot. But what's also funny is that like Muffy keeps wearing this throughout the episode, and every time you see her, like she doesn't really eat it very much, so there's just flies buzzing around her all the time.
Yeah, this would be so gross if she's like has it over her clothes. So I just think about like all the fuzzies and hair that would like stick to it, and yeah, there's like flies gathering around her. Like it's I don't like the edible scarf.
I like it to eat, not to wear. The opposite of leggings, armings, which Muffy can't move her arms when she has them on. She tries to bring the monocle back. So old it's new. I got a genuine laugh out of Muffy just walking straight into a locker with the monocle on. That was really funny. The last one that she's like kind of working on but doesn't see through past the illustration phase is designer antlers, as she also finds out that everybody. So Sue Ellen started wearing the
they call it an ear flap hat bag is what they call it in the show.
Okay. She starts wearing that, and then more kids start wearing it because they just like how it looks, and Muffy is completely behind. She doesn't understand why people think this is interesting. They don't get it at all. There's as Muffy goes back to the Capri DeVapida show, Muffy is watching it so intently after she has this head injury with the monocle, and there's a great shot of her like watching the TV with her eyes wide open, and she just is like wordlessly nodding to like Capri DeVapida's like, you have to get inspiration from the world around you. You just have to use your eyes to look at things. And Muffy's like, again, very funny. So yeah, Sue Ellen's headwear becomes more popular, and eventually Muffy can't keep up. She's like running herself ragged, trying to like get something to catch on, and she's jealous of Sue Ellen. At one point, she says, "Can't you stick to being a world-traveling do-gooder?" And this led to my biggest laugh of the episode. Like really, like between scenes, between Muffy saying that and the next scene, she admits defeat. She goes to Sue Ellen's place. She's wearing like head-to-toe gray sweats, and Sue Ellen opens the door, and Muffy just looks like she's seen a ghost. She looks like she's been up for 3 days, and she just puts on her own headwear. And the drawing of her, like they put so many lines under her eyes to make her look tired, and she just haggardly and defeatedly puts it on as like, there, now I've got one too, except it's cashmere and it's better. I laughed huge. I thought that was really funny. Just the drawing of how Muffy looks when she shows up at Sue Ellen's house was enough to get me laughing. I really liked it.
This is iconic now. This is the visage of punished Muffy. And by the way, hot take.
Yeah.
This is her best outfit of the episode. I think that the gray sweat, if you had a gray sweatsuit and you put one of these knit hoods on, like I could see Kanye rocking that. Like, it's kind of avant-garde. But yeah, I mean, this is as good as time as any. So these knit hoods, it's so funny. This is 10 years before, or over 10 years before last winter. But people were wearing these last winter, Will. Like,
really?
It became a big thing that, like, people who knew how to knit, it's funny, it's kind of a combining theme of both these episodes. People who knew how to knit were knitting, like, these kind of pastel-colored detachable hoods. And like it became a big thing on like Instagram and stuff. It was like in the winter people were wearing them to keep their head warm, so you would wear a whole outfit and then you'd put on like a great bright green hood that looks just like these ones in the show, kind of over your head, even though it wasn't attached to your clothing. And so this was like a full-on trend this last winter, predicted by Arthur.
Do you have a name? Do you have a name for this? I want to see like the real world equivalent.
Yeah, I just called it a knit hood. Let's see what that brings up on Google Images.
Because it's really hard to describe just looking at it. It's like it's awfully strange. But yeah.
If you look up on a knit hood on Google Images, it's exactly what I'm talking about. Seasoned balaclava, knit balaclava.
Okay, so. Oh, okay. So, okay, I wasn't too far off in balaclava. It just doesn't, like, fit around your face like they normally do.
Exactly. And this was, like, a thing people were wearing last winter, rather.
This is exactly it. That is so weird.
My girlfriend has a pink one.
Oh, my God, that's so weird. It's, like, exactly the same thing. Man, Arthur, just ahead of its time. So yeah, Muffy sits down with Sue Ellen, and she admits that she can't come up with any kind of fad. But Sue Ellen shows a picture that she took of Muffy wearing this knit hood before in the wintertime, and Sue Ellen actually really admired that she did that. She coins the term, she muffied it up, which is to make something look even more classy just by wearing it. So a very nice thing for Sue Ellen to do. Muffy feels better hearing that, And the end of the episode is Muffy watching Capri Devapita and deciding to not listen to her anymore because, I mean, to make it especially, like, she says earlier in the episode that that Capri Devapita takes, like, inspiration from her dog. So in the final scene of the show, she's eating dog biscuits and thinking, like, her line is, dog biscuits are very warm, but they should be made in different flavors, like yellow. And so just, like, I think she might have a bit of, like, a concussion or something. And then Muffy's like, yeah, I'm not listening to this anymore. And Bailey says, we see Bailey wearing a sharp red tie. And he says, just wanted to Muffy it up a little, Miss Muffy. And that makes her very happy. So, yeah, I'll be interested to talk about that. But first, let's talk about Arthur Unravels.
Wait, did you not get Mark Brown's daily routine?
Oh yeah, we talked about it once, and it's just like at the end of these episodes are just Mark Brown. So usually it's Mark Brown demonstrating. I think in the last episode it was like drawing baby Kate. What did he do this time?
This time he told us what he does every day, which is eat a bowl of oatmeal with bananas, go for a walk. Or no, he goes for the walk first, then he has his breakfast, and then he just starts doodling.
Okay, then I need to start watching this again. I figured they were just his drawing tutorials, which is like they're good, but like once you've seen them once, you've kind of seen all of them.
This one was like a day in the life of Mark Brown, but not the full day, just literally his morning.
All right, I'll check out the next one, I promise. Okay, Arthur Unravels. How did this one strike you, Lucas?
I didn't really like this episode. There's nothing, the jokes that they make are funny in it. I like the imagination sequence, like the opening. I even, in a way, the word choice is a little bit suspect, but I even like the Pilgrim imagination sequence as well. And the one where he's like a spy. Like, I like all those stuff, but the overarching narrative to this episode, I think, is totally well-worn territory. We've seen it a million times before in Arthur, and I think of all the kind of times we've seen it, this is the least interesting and the most obvious. And it really gets into kind of after-school special territory, which is not a territory I usually find Arthur in, despite being a show that would be on after school. But you know what I mean. It's really earnest and kind of hitting you over the head with the moral of it. And so all those things led me to... And this season's been so good, in my opinion, up to this point. Like, in any other season, this would kind of just be a middling episode. But I feel like in a great season like this one stands out as, like, kind of one of my least favorites.
Yeah, I didn't really care for this one either. What I will say is that I liked that it was about knitting. Like, it's such a... Like, knitting is such an old hobby that it's just like... I don't know if I ever thought of it as a girly thing, but it's a grandma thing. Like, it's just something that you don't expect to get a lot of focus, but they really went for it. And then they found kids in the Word From Us kids that are, like, interested in knitting. So, like, cool. And, like, hey, knitting is something that has been around for... God knows how long, certainly not me, but it will continue to be around, and people will continue to knit, pieces of clothing and just cool stuff, and, might as well highlight it for kids and show that it can actually be fun or calming or just cool to work on a project. But yeah, it's just well-worn territory at this point. It's just like, and also, as we mentioned, there's some really good, like, it's a good-looking episode in terms of the way that it's laid out. But yeah, and also Dr. Fugue. So it's like the parts don't add up to what I would call like a really good episode. Again, it's just like Arthur is anxious about being perceived as this. It's like, it's season 14, man. Not only have they done this, they've done it way better. So like, I don't know. As we said, it's just, it didn't really, I wouldn't say it's a bad episode. It's one of the lesser episodes of this season, I would say. But if I think about it, probably Around the World in 11 minutes, I didn't like more than this, but it's also just like, this doesn't do very much for me anymore because, again, this is like, I feel like if we do this once a season, then we've done it more than 10 times at this point. So, yeah, find a new song. This one's getting old. However, All the Rage, I liked it. I liked it quite a bit, actually. It's still a little bit of a surprise because sometimes you get a Muffy episode and it's like, Muffy can be very hit and miss. But this was very funny. Like, I was surprised at how much I laughed at it. It's almost, this could almost be something that we have done before with Muffy, of like, she's trying to keep up on trends and she's trying to clout chase and all this kind of stuff. in the modern parlance. But the way that they make Muffy look foolish in this episode, and it's like Muffy almost never has the high ground. She's always chasing after the fad. She looks very desperate and uncool. And in doing that, it actually endears you to her a little bit more and makes the humor a lot better. So by bringing her low, and I think that's what good Muffy episodes do, is that when she is the focus, is that they kind of give her a goal, or they give her like adversity to overcome. And in this case, it's her own like adherence to fads and her own what's the word? How susceptible she is to them. And I think they do a really good job, and it's like a decent message and everything, but just like the items of clothing, her inventions, again, like secretly saying that like Muffy is really good at thinking of ideas and getting them done. She's very industrious, but they're just bad ideas because she's 8 years old. And it was funny. It was engaging. Like, I liked it. And so I can't ask for much more from a Muffy episode.
I agree with you, Will. I also loved All the Rage. And also, it really surprised me. And, you know, talking about the first episode of Arthur Unravels and how the moral kind of lacked nuance, this is the inverse, where I was expecting this episode to just basically be, oh, like, you know, fashion's very shallow and frivolous, and Muffy's silly for caring about it and always chasing these trends. But it actually has a different moral, which is that fashion isn't necessarily inherently wrong, but true fashion isn't just following the trends. It's doing what you like and doing it with style, right? That's kind of the conclusion it comes on, is that Sue Ellen ended up leading the trends because she was doing something because she liked it, and she thought it looked aesthetically cool on her, and then everybody saw her wear that knit cap with confidence and followed the trend. Similarly, at the end, we get the little section where Sue Ellen is kind of complimenting that Muffy does things simple, but she kind of classes it up a little bit. You know, it's so Muffy. She Muffies it up. And that kind of inspired her, and furthermore, kind of Bailey does that too, where he starts to care about fashion a little bit more, and he's like, you know, I put on my best red tie just because I'm trying to look good. So right. I really liked that was the conclusion it left on, it, that it's okay to care about what you wear and kind of try to put yourself out there fashion-wise, but you should be doing it for the right reasons, because you like the way it makes you feel, and not because you're just trying to look like everyone else, or you're just trying to follow the latest trend. And the other thing I really liked about this episode, you know, it's not perfect. You know, the Capri Davida, the Paris Hilton stand-in is a very dated kind of joke. But besides that, you're right. It's a really funny episode throughout. I liked all the Muffy inventions. I think it's kind of crazy that it predicted this real-world fashion trend. But my favorite part of this episode is the final meeting with Sue Ellen and Muffy, when Muffy's all defeated and she's at her lowest. And I had not put it together that, like, everybody was wearing that thing that Muffy threw away, and in the end, you know, Muffy's been searching to be a trendsetter this whole time, and in the end, she inspired Sue Ellen. That was the person that she had set the trend with in the first place, right? She was lamenting the fact that she wasn't a trendsetter, and it was like, oh, all along, you know, Sue Ellen was inspired by Muffy's swag. And I just thought it was such a cute moment. It's one of those Arthur moments where, like, I literally wanted to verbally say, aw, like, I love, in stories when the main character fails, but they inspire, you know, another character to succeed. So this was one of my favorite endings of the season thus far. I loved that little interaction at the end. And so overall, I really enjoyed the episode.
Yeah. And Muffy doesn't get a lot of those kind of, you know, cute or wholesome moments a lot. So really good to see. Well, that's going to do it for Elwood City Limits. This one was a bit longer, but there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to talk about with you guys as well. So thank you very much for listening. If you're a patron, coming up next week, in case you're not aware, with For the Kids, a PBS Kids podcast, Lucas's pick is that we're going to go back to Puppet Country, and I believe this also might be a Canadian production. We'll have to find out as we visit Whimsy's house. I'm really interested to take a look back at this, because I'm pretty sure there is an Arthur connection, at least in the voice cast, if not more so in the production. So stay tuned. We're going to be talking about Whimsy's house if you're signed up at patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. And then on the next episode of Elwood City Limits in 2 weeks, we're going to be looking at, I believe this is a double DW episode. So sorry to Darkness Slayer X. We're going to be talking about DW, Queen of the Comeback, and In My Africa, which actually I have kind of covered already. There is an ECL Flash Forward episode that I did a couple of years ago with a lovely person named Kara Oliver, who's a great author. Check out her books on Amazon.com. And we talked about In My Africa. It was a great... I really liked the conversation that we had together, and we talked about it from the perspective of Kara is black, and so we were talking about a lot of what that means and how the episode comes across. So if you'd like to listen to that again, I would encourage you to do so, because Lucas, you're going to be looking at this with fresh eyes. I'll be looking at it again. And we're gonna see what we think of it as we begin to wrap up season 14. We've only got like one other episode after this one, so this summer we're gonna be heading up to a new Arthur season. So keep it right here. Thanks again for listening to Elwood City Limits. We will be back with you. Remember, vote.thecoast.ca to nominate us for best podcast. Please and thank you. My name is Will Young, and for Lucas Mancini.
Since when do you need a live-in dog walker / yoga instructor?
We'll see you next time.